The left has been calling now for a children's crusade. They know they've been making these gun control arguments consistently for a long time. And they know that these gun control arguments have not been particularly effective. The gun control laws have not been put on the books. The gun control laws that are on the books have not really been enforced well. So now the left is looking for new spokespeople because they figure that it can't be the message that's wrong. It can't be that the American people don't particularly like the message. It has to be something else. And what it probably is that we've been using the wrong messengers. The messengers that we truly need in this crusade are children. As you know, this is a pet peeve of mine. When Jimmy Kimmel trotted out his small child, his baby, who has no political views from what I can see, to talk about Obamacare and suggested that his child's heart surgery at Children's Hospital with Dr. Von Starnes was an excuse for maintaining Obamacare, I said that this was immoral. I said it was immoral because my daughter had the same surgery at the same hospital with the same, well, a different surgery, but an open heart surgery, same hospital with the same doctor. And this did not confer expertise upon me regarding Obamacare. You actually have to study the issues. I objected when Democrats under President Obama would routinely trot out children and use children's letters as an excuse to talk about public policy. They did this a lot on guns. They would find a letter in the mail from a 7-year-old, probably written by mommy and daddy, about gun control. Why can't we just make all the guns go away? And it's really interesting. The other day, my parents brought over a box of old papers, the stuff I'd had from when I was a little kid. And I went to a public school, and I found a paper in there that I'd written when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And the entire thing was about environmentalism and how human beings are ruining the environment. And the reason that I was writing that paper when I was 6 or 7 years old is because this is basically what they teach in public school. They teach you that you're supposed to care about the environment, which is fine. But then they teach you that man is ruining the environment. Man responsible for the death of all the geese. This is the routine that they teach in public school. It's not necessarily true. In fact, the facts don't tend to back up the idea that human beings are solely responsible for degradation in every aspect of the environment. In many ways, environment has gotten better in the last few decades. But this is what I was writing when I was 7. Should I have been deciding gun policy? Probably not, because what I'd probably be parroting is what I'd heard from my teachers and from my parents. Because this is what children do. Adults teach children, and then children parrot what the adults have to say because they think adults are smart. It's only later when children become adults that they realize that adults are just as stupid as kids most of the time. One of the great disappointments of being an adult is realizing that all the people who have houses and cars are just the same stupid kids, but a little bit more mentally developed. That said, adults are adults and children are children, but because there are a bunch of high school kids who are now speaking out about gun control and the media wants to confer upon them virtue, the media wants to confer upon them the capacity for leadership, it's quite shocking and quite fascinating and quite stupid. So here, as I showed you before, is these kids chanting, "Hey, hey, NRA, how many kids did you kill today?" From the New York Daily News. I don't know if we actually, so they did that, and then there was a picture of all these kids lying in front of the White House because, you know, that means something. If children lie in front of the White House, that makes a difference. If it's 17-year-olds lying in front of the White House, that makes a difference. There was a kid named David Hogg who is apparently, according to his Twitter feed, he was pro-gun control long before this happened, which doesn't change anything. It just suggests that he had a political agenda and still has a political agenda. It wasn't like he was pro-gun and then flipped because of what he saw in front of him. New evidence changing his position. This is always his position. But David Hogg, he came out and was ripping anybody who has taken money from the NRA, and of course being treated with full seriousness by the anchors on this show, even though there's no credibility to the actual words that this human being is speaking. Emma Gonzalez, another shooting survivor, doing the same thing.
We would hope that you have the decent morality to support us at this point.
And not take money from people that want to keep lessening gun legislation and making it even easier for these horrifying people to get guns. Because if you can't get elected without taking money from child murderers, why are you running?
And there's Allison Camerata kind of shaking her head softly, and giving full credibility to idiotic comments like this. I'm sorry, whether it's said by a 17-year-old or whether it's said by a 35-year-old, stupid comments are stupid comments. This is a stupid comment. If you can't take, who are the child murderers that he's talking about? Is it ISIS? Who are the child murderers? Is it Planned Parenthood? No, it's the NRA. And the NRA gives money to politicians because they think that the politicians are going to support gun rights. One of the memes that was going around yesterday that is an absolute falsehood, it's an absolute lie. There was a meme going around yesterday suggesting that the NRA had paid for the gun training of this kid. No, of the shooter. No, what actually happened is that the NRA gave money to the Junior ROTC, right, which is a training program for future military members. JROTC is a fantastic program. ROTC is a great program. Okay, this kid, this shooter, this terrible human being, went to some of these shooting programs with JROTC. And the media ran with this as NRA had a training program for the kid. That's not remotely true. That's not true. That's what the media was pushing, because again, the message matters more than the actual truth of the message. And just because these kids experience pain and suffering, our hearts go out to them for experiencing pain and suffering, but it doesn't mean that what they're saying makes any sense. Lots of people experience pain and suffering. And Jim Garrity was making this point yesterday with regard to the Jersey girls. These are the women whose husbands were lost in 9/11. They were very radically left, and they were conferred what some people on the left, I think it was Maureen Dowd, suggested was absolute moral authority. It gave them absolute moral authority. Now, there's no such thing as absolute moral authority for any statement. Either a statement is true or a statement is false. Moral authority means nothing. You don't have moral authority to say something simply because you suffered. The question is whether what you are saying is effective and truthful, and whether it forwards a proper agenda for the American people, not whether you have personally suffered in doing this. There are lots of people who have personally suffered and then do terrible things. It doesn't mean that they're allowed to do terrible things or say terrible things. Personal suffering does not make something more legitimate. It's a real pet peeve of mine. But what Garrity was pointing out is that the Jersey girls were treated with this tremendous respect by the media. They would go on national television shows and say things like it was an inside job, like 9/11 was an inside job. There were certain members of the Jersey girls who said that, and members of the media would give exactly the reaction you're seeing from Alison Camerata there, the kind of shake head, serious tone, like pretending that this is okay, what you're saying, just because you went through something terrible. Well, you going through something terrible doesn't make what you say any more or less true. It's either true or it's not. But again, the left has an agenda here, and the agenda here is to put up the most sympathetic faces possible in order to push an agenda that the left already wants. As I said yesterday, CNN's town hall they're holding tomorrow night with regard to gun control, I don't remember them doing the same thing after the Boston Marathon bombing. I don't remember them doing the same thing after San Bernardino, at least not for people who are stumping for a travel ban. They would never do the same thing with regard to people who are looking for better screening of illegal immigrants. I don't remember them doing a panel with Kate Steinle's family talking about why we need Kate's Law. Instead, they push stories about sanctuary cities every day. One of the things that happens in the media that people tend to ignore is selection bias. So CNN will say, yes, we covered the pro-gun control position and the anti-gun control position. Yes, but how did you cover it? What stories did you choose to cover? Fox News is biased in a particular way because they choose what they want to put on TV. And CNN is biased in a particular way because they choose what they want to put on TV. The segments that you choose to put on TV are just as important as how those segments are actually presented. So CNN spending blanket coverage on a bunch of students who don't know anything about gun control or gun laws or the efficacy of various proposals being trotted out because they're sympathetic faces, I just find really disheartening. Over the weekend, President Trump is apparently now considering whether he is going to push some gun control measures. One of the reasons he's doing that is because the media have launched an all-out emotional assault on gun control. Here is what CNN, Fox News, MSNBC have been doing. They've been covering all of the students from Parkland. They're high school students, and they're speaking out about gun control. So here are some of the students announcing national demonstrations on gun control.
Today, I'd like to announce that we have an event coming up to have everybody in the nation talking about what we're talking about. And one of the things we've been hearing is that it's not the time yet to talk about gun control. And we respect that. We've lost 17 lives, and our community took 17 bullets to the heart, and it's difficult to come back from that. So here's the time that we're going to talk about gun control. March 24th, we have the March for Our Lives, which you can find at marchforourlives.com, and expect to see us a lot. The March for Our Lives is going to be in every major city, and we are organizing it so students everywhere can beg for our lives. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about the red and blue, the GOP and the Democrats. This is about adults and kids.
Now, whom are you going to beg for your life? You're going to beg Trump for your life as though Trump could just flip a switch and suddenly these shootings would not happen anymore? There's significant disagreement about the method that should be used in order to militate against these shootings. There's significant and real disagreement on this. Right? I've suggested there ought to be wildly upped security standards at all of these schools, that there ought to be armed guards at virtually every door, that you might consider at some of these schools actually putting into place some doors that can actually close across the campus and lock like they have at hospitals. At many hospitals, they have lockdown procedures where an active shooter's in the hospital, and so you actually lock off certain parts of the hospital from other parts of the hospital so that the shooter can't just walk through the halls with impunity. And there's a lot of disagreement about this. Democrats want, of course, bans on all sorts of weapons, including the AR-15, which is the most popular rifle in the United States. But this idea that it's all about begging, that it's all about if we just cared enough, that all of this would be fine, we just agree on everything, that, of course, is not true in the slightest. This, of course, however, is what the left is suggesting. So the same student, Cameron Kasky, he says you're either with us or against us, which is pretty wild language considering we are all with you. No one wants to see kids get shot.
You're either with us or against us. We are losing our lives while the adults are playing around. And we have received endless support from your generation, and we thank everybody for that immensely because we really appreciate it. We don't need you. On March 24th, you are going to be seeing students in every single major city marching, and we have our lives on the line here. And at the end of the day, that is going to be what's bringing us to victory and to making some sort of right out of this tragedy.
What does victory look like? What does victory look like? That's the real big question. Okay, if victory is no more shootings, then we all agree on the definition of victory. If victory is a piece of gun control legislation that may or may not actually help, then we don't agree on what victory for the country looks like. And you can see that some of these students, obviously they're very politically motivated. That's okay. I mean, they're allowed to have their political motivations. My problem here is the same problem that I have with the country as a whole. The country as a whole takes being on camera as some sort of imprimatur of knowledge, some sort of imprimatur of expertise, and that's really silly. So LeBron James speaks about politics. That's his right. He's allowed to do it. Some of the stuff he says, I think, is not completely wrong. But why would we treat, as a country, his version of politics with more credibility than people who have studied the issues and studied the personalities for a long time? I don't, and I don't think other people should. Why would we take a bunch of high school juniors and say that these are experts on gun policy now? They're not experts on gun policy simply because their school was targeted. These are people who have experienced significant pain, and obviously we all stand with them and mourn with them in that pain. They have it to a far greater degree, I'm sure, than anybody who's far away. But that does not mean that what they are saying on politics has any more legitimacy or that it has any more expertise to back it. And yet there's a reason the media does this, right? After the Boston Marathon attacks, did you see victims of the Boston Marathon attacks on TV every day stumping for a travel ban on Muslims? Of course you didn't. After the Orlando shootings, did you see victims of the Orlando shootings who were not left-wing going around and saying, what we need here is a restriction on the number of Muslim immigrants from countries we can't vet? Of course you didn't. Right? The media go out of their way to put people on camera who are sympathetic. This goes all the way back to the Sandy Hook shooting when Piers Morgan was attempting to do this routine, and I called him on it on air. It's highly irritating to me, and it's intellectually dishonest. But there's a reason that all these kids are being put on TV and to put pressure to... The idea, by the way, that a child shall lead them when it comes to politics is silly. The idea that children are experts on policy because they have greater innocence, no, that means that they don't know enough. There's a reason that you don't let 17-year-olds define tax policy, and you shouldn't let 17-year-olds define gun policy either, depending on whether they've actually studied the issue in any significant way.